People see this and they think it's just a ton of detail. Well, it's more than that. It's about building depth before you earn any of the detailed marks. So what I'm going to go over today is how I build up values. You can see here that there's some less in the background and there's more here in the front. I'm going to teach you how to keep sharp edges versus keeping some of it soft in the background, better known as sfumato. And then I do want to mention that most horror creatures die on the page because the shading is just guesswork. So today I'm going to show you the exact system I use so that your drawings will never be flat again. And if you came here from the short where I showed the crazy detail trick, this is the full breakdown. So there's going to be no time lapse, no cuts through the hard parts, just good old-fashioned layering up. And what we'll do is we'll go to a certain section of my drawing that is not finished yet on purpose. And I'm going to show you how I take simple, light outlines of body parts, and I'm going to apply shading, and then we'll build up the value so you can see the different stages here. All right, grab your sketchbooks if you're feeling adventurous. If not, you could just watch and listen, and hopefully you come up with something at the end. All right, folks, let's jump into the lesson. Now, before we start drawing, let's jump into the materials that I'm using so that if you're completely lost as to what to draw with, maybe this can give you a good basis to start. I'm using a 4B from Tombow. And you can see the brand right here. And then I'm also using a black Prismacolor PC 935. It is not the Verithin. So I have the Verithin next to me over here. This is a Prismacolor Verithin. This is different. I'm using the actual colored pencil with a wax-based finish so that you can grab this straight from the colored pencil set. I love the wax because it helps keep the graphite down. So anytime that I'm drawing and I need to get super black, inside of places where there's no light or claws, places like that, even the tips of these strange feelers, I'll use the wax coupled with the graphite. I'll shade them together lightly at first and building up the values so that the wax helps keep the graphite down. That is what enables me to do this. And there's no smearing at all. And I didn't spray it with fixative, and this drawing has been in here for about 2 months. So that doesn't suggest that it will not smear over the years, but if you take good care of your sketchbooks and you don't, treat them like crap and you don't use your finger to smudge and shade, you're fine. Let's jump into step number 1, outlining. Now this entire creature was drawn with an outline. All of these muscles, most of them were outlines. Others came as I started drawing. Now, let's start thinking about layering up your shading so that it looks realistic. Most artists just don't have patience. That's what it is. So if I'm coming down here and I outline this leg, I'm going to grip the pencil lightly at the butt of it. So I'm going to use my pinky to guide my hand. I'm going to keep the majority of my palm off of my page. And I'm going to sit up straight, making sure my posture isn't terrible. And I'm going to shade back and forth, making sure that each stroke is close together. Now, it's very important that you commit to this movement until the majority of the area is covered. Are you going to finish shading with just that one pass? Absolutely not. I like to tell students, hey, maybe if you just shade in a minimum of 3 different directions by either tilting the sketchbook or tilting your hand, depending on how comfortable you are and how much control you have, that's better. So let's go direction number 2, over top of the previous direction, but not pressing harder. And I will keep the strokes close together and I will finish this area off. Now, up here in the corner where you see the kneecap and all the details, this already has, I believe, 5 or 6 different passes underneath all of the wrinkles and the tendons and the shadows. But, it doesn't hurt to be picky at this point, especially if you're going to be working on a drawing for a long time and you want to layer up correctly. This is how you make it believable. But remember what I said before about patience. This is the type of process where if you rush, your values will suffer, and they will suffer greatly. In my humble opinion, if you really want good turnout, like the values that you see here with the wrinkles and then more values and shadows, minimum of 10 passes. And that doesn't suggest that you're also not mixing in an extra 10 passes on top of the graphite with the black Prismacolor. So let's say, for example, you want a rougher texture like you see here, where you can see graphite, but you can also see it's like a roughness coming through the graphite. You're going to take the black Prismacolor and making sure that it is sharp. And you're going to follow the same direction that you did with the graphite, and you're going to bring it across. And the great thing about the color pencil is that since the texture is different and it's wax, it helps fill in the gaps of what the graphite could not cover. So they're like best friends working together, which is awesome. And there's no shame in looking at your drawing and going, you know what? I've been doing this for 20 minutes and I'm still not satisfied. Or if I've been doing this for an hour and I'm still not satisfied. It's okay. This is you building up the necessary skills. I think beginner artists get one specific thing backwards. They feel like they need to speed up in order to be better, and it's opposite. You need to slow down to gain your skills. Once you gain the skills, you do it more, which in turn makes you faster at it. Always remember that. So when you're rushing through your drawings and you're wondering why the values are not looking good, they're not looking realistic, the lighting is off, it's because you're skipping steps because you want to jump straight into detail. And that is a big, big no-no. Now, you can see here that, like, we'll just call it the shin bone, that the shin bone is becoming covered. Notice how the outline to the leg, there's shading past it. I want you to completely ignore that if you're drawing a creature right now and it has the same effect. Just check out the rest of this creature. All right, we have shading up here on the mandible coming past the outline. Up here on this crazy antenna, we have places in the back here where shading goes past these crazy egg sacs. On the back right here, we're going to have shading go past that too. Now let's say you're at that point where you've gone over this a good amount of times, maybe a dozen, maybe 7, maybe 8, maybe even 15, and it looks pretty smooth, and you mixed in your Prismacolor pencil with it, and everything looks pretty decent. Now you can start pressing harder on certain areas, but we have to establish a light source first. So with me, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it. You can see the cast shadow to some of these tentacles. Shadows are going straight down, the underside of the deltoid, bicep, and then of course I'm going to be putting a shadow in over here, and I'll show you that later. But the light source is essentially coming from above. And just to show you more, you can see that this gigantic mandible is coming out, but right behind it, I put a black Prismacolor over top of the graphite as a shadow. and it's forming the cast shadow down onto the body. Okay, so it is lit from above and maybe slightly at an angle. Okay, now how do we do this? So I'm going to hold my pencil lightly, and then we are going to control these movements, and we're going to add in shadow on our left. So this is the underside of this part of the arm. What I'm doing is I'm going back and forth very lightly. I'm just going to stick to this little area so you guys can really see this up close and how I'm doing this. Look how sharp the pencil is. You want to make sure that you go back and forth. Don't press harder, but just go back and forth until you fill in the gaps. Now, it's looking darker because the original shading pass that I had behind it is lighter. What I meant was when you start shading again for the shadow, you're going to press a little harder, and then when you go back over it, you keep that same pressure so that it looks uniform going back down. So we're going to keep going. And then I will also teach you about core shadow and bounce light also, because that's one of the things that's going to make this really pop off the page. This is what I mean by patience, everyone. If these types of drawings, they're more of a slow burn, but it's a bigger payoff. So it just depends on the level of detail that you really want out of this. Now notice how smooth that's looking. It's pretty decent. I'm happy with what's happening. The thing that I need to watch out for now are the muscles that will eventually be showing through that shadow. So it doesn't necessarily need a hard outline like this one, because there's going to be like metatarsals, there's going to be ligaments and tendons showing through here. I mean, right in front of this, I guess it's a kneecap. It's going to be the equivalent to a patella tendon, just like a human, where it comes in the front. So what I want to do is lightly brush in a tendon that's going to be wrapping right there. It's not human, but I want to give some human aspects to it. Remember, we're drawing something super creepy here. So the small oval movements that I'm making with my pencil are remaining light, and I'm going back and forth in a swooping motion, because I'm eventually going to have a tendon wrap around there. You got the big joint for the leg. The ligament's going to be attaching to the muscles coming down the arm. Now when it comes to the muscles coming down the arm, watch how lightly I put this in. I'm starting to ghost in a muscle on top of the shading, and you can see it come to life. Stop. Don't put anything else in there. Next, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to split that muscle off over here. So it's going to feel like the bone and the ligament coming up is attached to that bone, and as you travel down the arm, the muscle gets bigger, and then there's other muscles coming from a couple different directions, maybe some underlying muscles. This is how you layer up good anatomy mixed with shading. There we go. Now, if you want a deep dive on how I make up muscles, and if I don't look at any reference at all, and you want some deep dives into anatomy and how I study them, I do have a Patreon. So if you want to check the link in the description for that, we also have a free tier, and you can join and just snoop around. I got some freebies for you. I got live streams for tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. We have a bunch of options. So just let me know what you want to do, and you can check the links for that. Now here, I'm starting to finesse this arm, and finessing the arm is going to be very important, mainly because there's a lot of wrinkles right here. They're going to need to bend and like be malleable around that, because the skin is going to be, it's going to be drier here, but also a lot thinner, so there can be wrinkles and stuff. But this is going to be important. This part, ooh, this is going to be interesting. So when we get to that giant hand, I'll show you how I build that up. And remember, we're showing all of the different anatomy just from shading. That's it. We don't need to get super technical with, hey, I don't know what animal to study in order to achieve this anatomy. It's like, nope, doesn't matter right now. I'm just going to keep building this up. Now, as we progress, we can really start to see the layering take effect. If your outlines or your shading or little details are too dark, don't worry about that. The trick, okay, so here, let's rewind a little bit. Let's say that your outline is a little too dark, and then the shading inside of that line is light. Well, what you want to do is you want to press harder with the pencil so that the shading equals the tone of the line and fade it back into the leg. It's a really neat trick to do in case you accidentally do something that's outlined too much. Let's give another example here, now that you can see more of the shapes happening. Look at this little area right here. You see how the outer edge is dark and then all of a sudden everything in there is pretty light? Now I could say, well, I screwed up because the whole area over here is supposed to be in, a farther back section. The atmospheric perspective is taking over. Well, let's see if we can start darkening up some of the shading right at that line. And I'm moving further to my left. So we're just going to go up this way. We're going to turn the pencil a little bit. And slowly we're going to start shading lighter and lighter and lighter, but we're going to start it dark. So we're going to go dark. And then we're going to fade it up into the light. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. Now, this is going to take a little bit of patience because it's not going to be smooth right out of the gate. You're going to have to finesse that line a little bit, but it will look better. Let's take a closer look at what I'm talking about. See how the line right here is non-existent anymore? To the left of it, and we're getting technical here, to the left of it, it's faded off slightly. Now I'm going to leave the rest of the tone right there, and I'm going to go to the edge of where I see that it's dark. And then I'm going to slowly shade that into the lighter bit. And voila. It's better. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better. So let's say that we move up here to this strange pipe coming out of the chest. Now this line that's separating both of those pipes, that's pretty dark. That's because there's no light getting in between there. But I don't really like how isolated that looks. It just kind of looks cookie cutter. So I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to go back and forth rapidly, not pressing too hard. But I'm going to try to equal the darkness of that original line. And then I'm just going to bring it up on both sides of the pipes. So then when I do that, it looks like there's shadow in between those and it's evenly dispersed between both sides. That's the kind of work that it's going to take in order to take away some of the dark lines that you don't want. For example, when we look down here at this strange tentacle coming out, I did put outlines to these. And if you want to make something look very realistic, you shade into that line so that there is no cartoonish outline anymore, if you're not doing cartoons. If you're doing cartoons, that's a different ballgame. But if you don't want it and you want it to look more realistic, you shade up to that. That way, the edge of it exists with the same tone going around it. There you go. Okay, everyone, as promised, we're going to jump back into this little area really quick before we get to the foot, because I want to talk about core shadow and bounce light. Now, those of you that are not familiar with the terms, core shadow is essentially the spot on the object where the darkest part lies. So if light source or the light source is coming down, then that means that if you follow the edge of the forearm, the outermost crest before it goes underneath, that is where it's going to hold the darkest shade. Because what happens is as I start to go back underneath the arm, guess what? The light source is going all the way down past the leg, past the body, and it's bouncing off of the surfaces underneath. Now, you're obviously going to have stronger bounce light if it is a reflective surface that it is bouncing off of. But the one thing about the human eye is we can't really see light bouncing off of even rocks and organic materials like dirt and trees and everything, but it does, and the same thing with color. So we have to trust that process. Now, the great thing about drawing is that we can eliminate atmosphere if we wanted and just go straight to core shadows. Great way to practice this obviously is from Foundation Studios. You got your good old sphere. You can also have core shadows on cylinders and cones, and hey, even cubes. But you can see here how the light source is getting dark right here, and the core shadow is going to follow that forearm. But guess what? The joint right here is also going to have a core shadow. The ligament, the muscles going down the forearm, that's going to have a core shadow. Now, how do we apply that? Well, we have to honor the roundness of each shape. Okay, so if this is coming around like that, then the outermost crest is going to happen right about there. Now notice what I did there. Look underneath it. Do you all see that very light strip going across right there? Just that tiny little bit connecting to the bottom of the forearm. That's to show not only is there bounce light, but this little strip right here is basically a light catcher. So that means that if there is any residual light coming down this way, it's going to bounce off that top tendon right there. Same thing with here. I told you we're getting technical, but this is how we shade, and these are the little nuances that we have to look out for when it comes to making, the creatures that you sketch more realistic. Now, remember that muscle strip that I drew before? The striation, the giant tendon, and all that stuff. We drew the tendon in there, and we drew the little separations with all the muscles. But we have to honor what core shadows do, because a core shadow is going to sit on top of that. Now, it's pretty intimidating, right? We don't want to ruin the muscles that we drew. Well, this is why we layer, and this is why we start light and work our way to the dark. So if you put the muscles in first, just with light indications, then take your pencil and without fear, go over top of the line that you drew. Don't worry about if it ends up as dark as the line of the muscle. Don't worry about it. Because guess what? You're layering. You're getting darker. You can only get darker with a pencil. You can't get lighter. So we're just going to go back over some of the really important areas, like the original outline of that arm. See, I didn't ruin anything. Now look at that big dark patch in there. Obviously, we don't want that because we lost the bounce light that's inevitably going to happen on that forearm, right here where I'm pointing. We're going to go above it, where the forearm is rounding. We're going to make that darker. We're going to do small little circles, and we're going to travel down the arm. Now look what happened. Pretty powerful core shadow right there. And the great thing is we can get away with this core shadow being a little darker than that one because of atmosphere. This is closer to us. So we got to be careful though. We don't want to get too dark, otherwise it's going to look black, and we can't get black. You should never ever draw with black in any drawing ever, unless it's tiny little areas where the least amount of light is going in. Other than that, you're going to regret it. Okay, anyway, this strip right here, we want to even that out with the rest of the tone of the muscles. So I'm just going to make tiny little circles right above that core shadow, right like this. Now the bounce light strip you can see, okay, any light that's bouncing off the surface down there, whether it's obsidian, whether it's rock, whatever it is, it's hidden right there. Now we kind of lost it right here, but you could make the case that, well, technically this whole kneecap is kind of casting a very ominous shadow over everything. So even if there is bounce light, it's still going to be pretty dark. Let's just call it that, and we won't get into it anymore. Now, we don't want this to end up too flat in here, and you can easily fall into that trap too. So you can see these pencil strokes going up, and these were tiny ovals when I was doing it. Remember that big patellar tendon that was going across here, and then we had the big shin bone? Well, we can go back over that area with tiny little circles again and lightly build in that bone again. We just have to press a little harder because of all the shading we just did for the core shadow. And there we go. Now, this is where it's going to pay to go in a different direction. We definitely want to treat that with a little bit more love. And this bone is too light compared to this area. So when this happens, don't freak out. This is when people would go grab this thing. They would go grab an eraser and they would erase what they shaded and screw everything up. Because then the edges of the area that you erased, they're not going to be shaded. Then you try to go back in and shade it and it looks terrible. So you don't want to do that. What are we going to do? We're going to darken the bone. Not as dark as the shaded muscle, but we're going to darken that bone. And then what's going to happen is we're going to start to even out that value. And this is why it's so beautiful to learn how to shade like this. It takes some practice, but it will pay off. Just go over it and over it like this. Change direction. Shift your sketchbook around. Okay, maybe hit it like this until it becomes smooth. Then you take your pencil and finesse that line back in there. Very light. It's kind of like you're brushing hair or something. Just very light. Where you want the tendon to sit. See that little ligament right there, or that little line? Just going to continue that down. Make it connect to the leg. There we go. Now it's starting to look good. And this is without skin details, everybody. This is just shading. So this is the type of patience that you need, but also these are the types of values that you need to build up over time so that you can go over top of this and start filling in all of these natural little grooves that happened while you were shading. You can call them happy accidents. You can call them, little marks that are ready to be shaded. And this skin right here is really good for it, because it kind of reminds me of, elephants and hippo, rhinos even with their joints. Just keep going in here. Start darkening little specks where there's imperfections in the skin, maybe cuts. And all of a sudden, look at that kneecap. Now, just to put in some nice little finishing touches, as that are in the form of lines. You don't want to outline it too hard, but you're going to go in and you're going to find any new directional change. So this joint goes down and then it goes straight out. That divot, you go dark to light. Okay, inside here, you go dark to light. Inside here, you go dark to light. Why? Because there's a big angle right there where the body changes. This is a very important area. So I want everybody to pay attention. Sharpen your pencils. Don't use an eraser. Instead, we're going to work up values because there's going to be another core shadow. See if you guys can guess where it is before I point to it. Yeah, it's going to be right there. Now, why is that? Let me explain. So you got the core shadow right here, and you got the bounce light bouncing right up, and that's what that light area is. Well, guess what? The body, or its forearm, is wrapping back around the other side of the arm. Well, the bounce light also is going to form a core shadow, because that rounded part is going to have an area where the least amount of light is getting to. And we're going to see it right along the edge right there before it starts to go up the arm. But we're not going to treat this nearly as dark as this. Instead, we will brush in small circles, very light with your pencil, over and over, until it gets pretty smooth. And then there, you're going to have a nice little coarse shadow. Now, will it be perfect? No, but you can clearly see the depth happening. You got the light up here, you got the coarse shadow, you got the bounce light, and then you have the other coarse shadow, which completes the cycle. And then of course you have it right here where the rest of the leg is. Now, when it comes to little areas like this is why I like using 4B. I'm going to go back in here and try to imagine places on this arm where I know the deeper wrinkles will happen. And since this creature is rearing up, it seems, the leg is bending, so the skin is going to need to bend with it. So we're just going to make it have some wrinkles on the side right here and just add some depth. Okay, and then we can do the same thing right in here, but we don't want to go overboard. So we're going to have some wrinkles over top of the tendons. That's when the realism happens. Okay, see these tiny little circles that I'm doing? You can see the shadows and the textures happening all at once. And I'm not pressing hard. I'm just working it up, letting the pencil do the work for me. There we go. You see this darkness right here? I told you, that's the coarse shadow again. It's going to happen. It's going to happen here. Maybe not as much because this leg is basically turned upward. It's going to catch a lot of that light. All right, but just these tiny little areas where you get dark. Tiny little areas. It's really going to help. There we go. Right like that. The elbow, I'm just going to call it the elbow. I'm going to give it a nice little coarse shadow because there's some different surfaces going on right there. There we go, right like that. Now see that little dark speck that I added there? I don't like that I did that. I feel like I kind of screwed up a little bit. I didn't screw up, it's kind of like an opportunity, let's just say that. So I'm just going to do some tiny little circles on the edge of it. I'm going to see if I can even that out. There we go. Okay, so now it looks intentional, even though it wasn't, but that's our little secret. So I'm going to tilt my sketchbook a little bit, and you can see the foot happening right here. Now, I would fill it by going to the nail first. And when I say fill it, I literally mean fill the whole thing. It's kind of like you're just filling it with liquid. You're going to go in one direction, and you're not going to try to fill the bottom of it. You're just going to go and go and go until you run out of leg. So it just so happened that the line got cut off right there because I didn't want to start shading and then turn my pencil and shade again. The turning would screw up the smoothness of the shading. What are we supposed to do if we see the direction like this? We get tiny little gaps in there. Do we start cross-hatching? Well, what I'm about to show you, technically we do. I'm going to start down here. Now, I haven't drawn the outline of the rest of the foot. That's okay. I still need to give the anatomy some thought. But I'm going to start down here lightly, and I'm just going to work my pencil up, going back and forth, over everything, even going outside of the lines. Okay, now look what happened. See all of the edges having shading over it, and you can still see the pencil strokes? Great, let it happen. Direction number 3, you ready? It looks like I went diagonal the first time. I flatten out this way. So I'm going to try to move my arm, and I'm just going to go this direction. Now notice how I'm not pressing harder. I'm just going across everything, big strokes. Look what's happening inside that arm now. You start to see these little areas fill up fast. Now I'm just going to slightly change the direction, and then I'm going to press lightly and I'm going to fill it up again. Remember when I said I'm not really satisfied unless I do about 10 passes, but you can have 3 if you want to start. I really mean that, okay? You can definitely keep going on this. If you have all the time in the world and you just want to hit up a crazy, I don't know, illustration or something, and you have hours and hours and hours, I would give it 15 passes. Say 15. Okay, and I was going this direction across that knuckle, so I'm just going to continue that direction and keep going across. Now, am I done? Nope, I'm not. In this case, I'm going to flatten this. Let's see, I'm going to turn my sketchbook this way. It's going to look a little awkward for you guys right here, but I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to go down like this. Okay, right like that. I'm trying to fill up as much area as I can, keeping the strokes close together. Notice how I haven't pressed harder on anything. Nothing at all. I'm just filling it in, folks. Look at this. It's starting to match this area. That is what you want. I'm going to go over it again, and again, and again. I'm not going to record everything like that. I just want to show you how to layer it. By the way, since this drawing is so large, this is going to be a multi-part series. All right, so I will come back to this drawing at some point because I really do want to show you guys how to finish these drawings. I mean, these areas that I've shown you here, you're going to treat the rest of the creature just like that. Okay, and you're going to make sure that all the anatomy makes sense. Down here, I will probably need to do several thumbnails before I'm really happy about what I want the anatomy to be doing. But before we end it today, I do want to show you how I'll put in the claw. And we're going to put in the claw by lightly sketching in what we'll just call the cuticle. There we go. Right like that. And I mean, if you wanted the technical terms, you have your claw bed. You know, the claw bed is where it houses the nail. So it's the skin that the nail comes out of. And then, of course, you have your cuticle, which is the small fold of skin at the base of the claw. There we go. This is how I would lightly sketch in some areas on top of the shading. All right. Now, if you enjoyed today, I mean, I enjoyed having you all here. Comment below and let me know what you're working on. Let me know if this helped you, because I want to see what you guys have been working on. Comment below, and check the link in the description below for our Creature Design Workshop Discord. It's a bustling community. We have monthly creature design challenges, and we take all skill levels. It doesn't matter. It's free to join. Just have a bunch of fun. We can have our sketchbook threads together, all of that stuff. So thanks again, everybody. You have been awesome, and I wouldn't be here without you, and I couldn't do any of this without you guys. So thanks again. All right, till next time, peace.